More fun stuff. We're really getting into the fun part of this, the fun stuff. So we've been talking about markets, how markets work, how markets maybe don't work sometimes. What about global markets? Every time we turn around, somebody's talking about us in China or us in Canada or Mexico. We don't operate in just the United States. We operate in a global marketplace. How does that affect everything we're doing? Good question, huh? Okay, so basic terminology that hopefully you sort of already knew coming in. The words export and import. So an export doesn't mean that some physical thing had to leave our country. Let's be clear about this. If we think that export means that Boeing built a plane in Seattle and sold it to someone in Malaysia, and a thing had to leave the United States, that's not a good way to think about this. The right way to think about this is exports are when we sell something to some other country and money comes into the United States. Okay? So yeah, Boeing sells a jet to Malaysian Airlines. The airplane leaves the country. Money comes back in. Okay? But we live in Las Vegas. And under normal times, every day, aircraft are landing at McCarran Airport from China, Korea, England, Norway, Germany, Mexico. Okay? Korea, did I say Korea? When times were normal, people were coming here from all over the world. Those people are exports. A British citizen who comes here and loses $100 in the casino is no different than us selling $100 to England worth of spam. Okay? Whatever we do that brings money into the United States from outside for a good or a service that we provide, that's an export. So Las Vegas is a huge exporter under normal times. We export hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stuff every year, and we don't have to go anywhere. People bring themselves here, and that's our export. Okay? Import means that we buy something, that money is leaving our country in exchange for a good or service. So when we buy stuff at Walmart that was made in China, those are imports. If you get on a plane and you go take a vacation in jolly old England so you can go up to Edinburgh and see where Adam Smith is buried, you are an import for the United States because you were taking your money out of the country in exchange for goods and services. Notice that there's a kind of a reciprocity in this international stuff. When a tourist comes to Las Vegas, that's an export for the United States. It's an import from whatever country they came from. So when English folks come here or German folks come here, that's an export for us, it's an import for them. If you go on vacation to Spain, now that's an export for Spain and an import for the United States. So in the international world, everything works the opposite for each country. There's two sides, and each side is the opposite of the other side. Okay, so again, why are we involved in all this? Why do we think trade's a good thing? And we go back to our oldest buddy, or one of our oldest buddies, David Ricardo, and this theory of comparative advantage. We can make our country better off by specializing in things and then trading with other countries that have specialized in other things. If we isolate our country and we don't trade, there's hardly any coffee or chocolate. There's the little bit that gets grown in Hawaii, and that's it. Most of us want there to be coffee or tea or chocolate or bananas, things that we don't produce in the United States. Okay? And we like the fact that there's a lot of nice, high-paying, high-tech jobs in the United States, and we don't have to put a lot of effort into producing things that we're not very good at. What resources would it take to grow large quantities of bananas in the continental United States? All right? That's going to take resources away from other things. We're going to have low-paying banana jobs instead of high-paying computer jobs. All right? So we're much better off as a society if we specialize in the things we're good at and let other people specialize in the things that they're good at, and then we trade. Okay? So what are we good at? Well, we're good at things that we, relatively speaking, can produce at a low cost. Okay? So in a country like the United States, we're good at producing things that are capital intensive. Machines are relatively inexpensive in the United States compared to other places. Educated workforce exists here. Lots of people have been to school, been to college. We have engineers and scientists, and right? So relatively speaking, we can produce those high-tech things at a lower cost. We also produce a lot of creative things. We have a lot of smart and creative people, and we produce books and movies and television shows. Okay? The movie industry is a huge exporter from the United States. Everybody in the world watches American movies, American TV shows. It's not that they don't make their own movies. If you've never seen Bollywood movies from India, you haven't lived. But there's a bigger market globally for U.S. entertainment than for any other country. All right, so let's just throw some numbers out here. Exports and imports, and I put 2016 and 2019 so you can compare what's happened over the last few years. In 2016, the U.S. exported $1.45 trillion worth of goods. $1.45 trillion we exported. But we imported $2.21 trillion. So we imported $760 billion roughly of stuff more than we exported. That's a lot. $760 billion. Okay? We bought $760 billion more of stuff from other countries than they bought from us. I put this dump truck up there because industrial equipment like that is huge, huge exports of the United States. We'll talk about that in a second. In 2019, you notice that our exports had risen. We'd gone from $1.45 trillion to $1.65 trillion, but our imports have also risen over the last 3 years from 2.21 to 2.52. We've turned that $760 billion into only $602 billion. We've equalized things out a little bit, but it's still $602 billion difference, okay, in our exports and our imports of goods. We also do services. Now, the United States in 2016 exported $758 billion in services, and in 2019, $845 billion. We imported only $512 billion in 2016 and $595 in 2019. So essentially, between 2016 and 2019, we maintained our balance. We are $250 billion more of exports than imports in services. We have a minus in goods. We have a plus in services. That plus in services has pretty much stayed the same the last 3-4 years, and it's been some decrease in the minus from goods. Okay? What do we export? We export industrial machinery. We export travel, Viva Las Vegas. We export oil, which might be a surprise to some people, but we do. And we export business services. In fact, let's go back to 3 for a second. There's an oil war where Russia and Saudi Arabia arguably can be trying to drive the U.S. out of the oil business. And we'll talk about that toward the end of this little lecture. Business services. People come to the U.S. for advertising, for banking, for all kinds of business support because we're good at all that stuff. Okay? We're good at building bulldozers. We're good at building machines to help you build your factory, all this industrial machinery, right? We're good at that stuff. What do we import? Well, automobiles, mostly not the cars. Even though if you buy a Ferrari, that Ferrari was built in Maranello, Italy, and imported into the U.S., most of the foreign automobiles sold in the United States are actually built in the United States. So if you have a Toyota or a Honda or a BMW, Mercedes, odds are that it was actually built in the United States. But aside from a few cars that are imported, and like Volkswagen imports most of their cars, we import the parts. So that Honda that you bought is built in a factory in the United States, but a big percent of the parts, right? A big percent of the parts that are in that car came from Mexico or came from China. Okay? I have friends who drive Ford pickup trucks and they're all, it's American. I'm like, no, it's Mexican. So most of what's in that Ford F-150 was built in Mexico and then it was assembled in the United States. And they don't like the fact that I refer to their Ford as Mexican. But it is. Imports a lot of oil. The United States still imports a lot of oil, even though we export oil, we import oil. Consumer goods, lots and lots of consumer goods. We buy consumer goods, right? All that stuff at Walmart comes from China. And then we import travel, which means Americans go other places. So let's talk about our world here, and let's think about growing wheat. If there's no trade, if the U.S. neither imports nor exports wheat, we'd have a little wheat market just like this, where there's the demand for wheat and the supply of wheat, and we'd have an equilibrium price of wheat, and American consumers would buy a certain quantity of wheat. So let's say that we live in this world where there's no trade. We are paying $5 a bushel for wheat. That's our equilibrium price, is $5 a bushel, and we're eating 3 billion bushels of wheat. And even though I rounded those numbers off, that's not bad compared to what the U.S. actually does. But ignoring that, what happens if we open up the world to trade now, right? So we're going to trade. What happens if farmers in Canada and Mexico and Argentina and wherever are able to sell wheat for $3? So the production, the equilibrium price in the U.S. without trade is $5, but we can buy wheat from other countries at $3 a bushel. What's going to happen? Well, let's start here. So let's say that we can buy wheat. We have a world price of wheat is $3. So the U.S. was not importing or exporting wheat. We were just living in our own wheat world. And now we change and we open up the market and just say free market in wheat. Okay? And the rest of the world was paying $3 a bushel for wheat while we were paying $5. Okay? What's going to happen? Well, obviously, we're going to import a lot of wheat. So the supply curve, the purple line, that tells us what U.S. producers are willing to grow. So instead of producing 3 billion bushels at $5 a bushel, U.S. producers are going to cut back. They're going to grow less wheat. So U.S. farmers are going to grow 2 billion bushels of wheat now at $3 a bushel. And we're going to import. But consumers are happier. Bread's going to be cheaper. Right? Everything that we make from wheat, tortillas, will be cheaper. Everything that has wheat in it, which is a lot of stuff, from breakfast cereal to bread to tortillas to certain alcoholic beverages that are made from wheat. Okay? So, consumers are going to consume more wheat products because those are now cheaper. Right? And where do we see consumers? Consumers are on the demand curve. So we were here in America, we were at $5 a bushel when there was no trade. We were producing 3 billion bushels and we were eating 3 billion bushels of wheat. Now we open up our economy to the world. The price falls to $3 a bushel, to the world price. At that price, U.S. farmers have cut back. U.S. farmers are only going to produce 2 billion bushels, but U.S. consumers now want to consume 4 billion. And how are we going to get there? We're going to import 2 billion bushels from the rest of the world. So now we're going to import the difference between that 2 billion and the 4 billion. We're going to import those 2 billion bushels. Okay? We're importing 2 billion bushels in between what the U.S. produces and what the U.S. consumes. Okay? Now, who's better off and who's worse off? Well, let's look at farmers. The farmers. Remember, consumer and producer surplus. Yes? Businesses were making all of this. Now businesses only get that. The American farmers lose. And how much do they lose? Well, they lose this area right in here, this shape. That's what American farmers have given up. Okay? American farmers, U.S. farmers are worse off. But U.S. consumers, they were getting this, right? This area, this triangle was their consumer surplus, right? That was consumer surplus before we started to trade. Now, consumer surplus is what? Consumer surplus has grown. And now all of this triangle accrues to consumers. All of it. And you're saying, why are you messing up my graph? Well, I felt like it. Just go with it. Consumers are way better off. The entire loss that is suffered by farmers is recovered by consumers with extra. So consumers' increased happiness is more than farmers' decreased happiness. Okay? In this graph, if the world works this way, the amount that consumers gain is more than the farmers lose, and society as a whole should be better off. And again, remember our old buddy Pareto. We could take something away from the consumers to reimburse the farmers. Okay, let me say that again. We could take money from the consumers. We could go to the consumers and say, hey, farmers. And we could tax the consumers to compensate the farmers for their loss. And the consumers would still be better off. The amount that we have to take from the consumers to give to the farmers who lost out in this deal is less than what the consumers gained. So society as a whole would be better. I can make the farmers better off with, right? You with me? The farmers will be just as well off as they were before. The consumers will be better off. It's Pareto optimal. Trade is good. Again, the message of all these things is trade is good. Trade makes society better off. Free trade, unencumbered free trade here can make society better off. It's not that there won't necessarily be winners and losers, but society as a whole can be better off because we're trading. We're getting the wheat for $3, and we're getting more wheat for $3 than we were getting for $5. If we take care of those farmers, everybody's at least as well off as they were before, and the consumers in general are better off. Okay? So, good. Yes, it's good. No? Okay.